Good evening and thank you for joining us for another episode of Business PNG. We continue our coverage of the 2019 PNG Investment Week, this time with the 15th UN ESCAP Asia Pacific Business Forum. Business PNG had exclusive interviews with a number of participants that attended. Thank you for your time, sir. If you could introduce yourself and basically where you work.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zara Khan. I'm the Director for Programs and Initiatives at the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, representing the Secretary General Dame Meg Taylor here in Papua New Guinea for the 15th Asia Pacific Business Forum.
Thank you for that. So you're here to talk about climate change and mitigating climate change. Correct me if I'm wrong, mitigating climate change. Tell us a little bit about what's that all about.
Thank you. So we were part of the first panel session that was held today here at the Asia Pacific Business Forum organized by ESCAP. The theme of the panel was around climate change financing and sustainable development of SMEs in the Asia Pacific region. And we're very privileged that ESCAP has organized the Asia Pacific Business Forum here in Papua New Guinea. This is the first time that a Pacific Island country has hosted the Asia Pacific Business Forum. And so, we're very honored that one of our largest member states of the Pacific Islands Forum has hosted this very prestigious event. And obviously, because this event is being hosted in Papua New Guinea and in the Pacific region, we were able to draw light upon the important priority areas that our leaders have had around the issue of climate change, and in particular climate change financing, and how SMEs can become more involved, particularly when it comes to preparedness against these natural disasters, and also some of the mitigation and adaptation measures that can be put in place. So we had very robust discussions this morning. We had panelists from the private sector as well as from academia as well as non-governmental organizations, and everyone gave very constructive input towards the topic that we were discussing. And I think there was a very clear outcome in the sense that there is a strong demand for a very close working relationship between the government and the private sector when it comes to preparing for natural disasters. I think a very good example of this was last year when the 2018 earthquake hit Papua New Guinea, and you had large companies like Oil Search, which was part of our panel this morning, that came in and worked hand in hand with the government in terms of helping Papua New Guineans who were affected by that particular natural disasters. And I think when it comes to natural disasters and the impact that it has on SMEs and businesses in particular, I think it's a catch-22 situation in the sense that they are one of the worst affected, but they are also the most needed when it comes to recovery efforts. So I think the session today focused around the fact that we need to make sure that we give our private sector as much support as they need to ensure they have the resources available to them so that they can bounce back from natural disasters as soon as possible and basically be that extra helping hand to government when it comes to helping people.
Especially in the Pacific, that's quite a big problem, especially what you said. We are with the effects of climate change, we are the most, the people that I guess suffer through it the most. The Forum Secretariat have proposed, I think, to their forum leaders, the Pacific Resilience Fund. And last month, I think it was, at the Finance and Economic Ministers meeting, it didn't go through just yet. They wanted to review it. Tell us a little bit about any updates on that.
So I think one of the most important things for the Pacific region is that when development partners are working with us, that they know that the priorities are being driven by the Pacific leaders and by the region itself, because it's the Pacific states themselves that know where the priorities are and where resources are needed the most when it comes to climate change and disaster preparedness. And so it was quite historic, I believe a few years ago, that the leaders approved a regional strategy or a framework called the Framework for Resilient Development for the Pacific region. And under that framework, we have various instruments that have been developed, and one of the most important ones is the Pacific Resilience Facility that you've just mentioned. And so the Pacific Resilience Facility is a Pacific-owned facility that's being developed, and as you mentioned, it is on the verge of being considered by our ministers and our leaders for final approval. And so what it would allow us to do is channel resources from development partners as well as member states themselves to ensure that we have a fund that is readily available to our private sector as well as government when it comes to tapping into resources so that we can be prepared for disasters. I think the most important thing to note that this is a fund that's separate from everything else that's there at the moment, because as you know, and one of the very good things is that the world's focus is on climate change and on the Pacific region, and we have a number of facilities like the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Fund that focus on adaptation and mitigation measures, but the Pacific Resilience Facility will focus on preparedness in particular. to ensure that our private sector and our governments are ready for these natural disasters and ensure that the impact is minimized.
Thank you, sir, for your time. Tell us a little bit about what you are discussing. I believe it's on strengthening connectivity between the Asia Pacific.
Infrastructure connectivity is one of the very most important factors in developing a country in terms of its to bring it to the outside world and also realize the modernization.
I understand that Papua New Guinea is taking part in the Belt and Road Initiative. Our Prime Minister before, Prime Minister Peter O'Neill, traveled to China recently, early this year, for the Belt and Road Forum. How is that, Papua New Guinea is a big major country. It's the biggest country in the Pacific, and that, I guess, it's just a boost of confidence for the Pacific to be linking up with China in this. So how's that all?
We know that Papua New Guinea has been a very important country and it's an indispensable part for the international global economy. So we think that Chinese Belt and Road Initiative has really paid a lot of attention on the Papua New Guinea's development. And so as I have noticed that, currently China has a lot of projects, infrastructure projects here. It is happening, but in my view that it's not, a lot of projects are just a small project. It's not big enough. And also the quantity is not enough. So we think that we still have a lot of room and a lot of potential to tap. So my suggestion is that in the future, Papua New Guinea should find some channels, more channels, various modes to try to make the Chinese enterprises know about your projects and to make them have more interest in various cooperation.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
I'm Lian Jurari in Lorengau, and you're watching Business PNG.
Thank you, Mr. Fifita, for your time. Thank you for being with us and discussing expanding renewable energy in the Pacific. Tell us, why is this important? I mean, I know that climate change is a huge topic and it's a huge issue nowadays. But why is leaning towards renewable energy so important for us?
Yeah, I suppose it's a dilemma in the Pacific Islands. On the one hand, we are the most vulnerable to climate change, and as you know, the climate change is caused by greenhouse gas emissions, of which most are coming from the combustion of fossil fuels. So on the one hand, the Pacific Islands is so heavily reliant on imported fossil fuel, and at the same time, we are the most vulnerable to the adverse impact of climate change. And the solutions to that is to reduce our reliance on fossil fuel, and we can do that through using more renewable energy technologies and using the energy sources that we have more efficiently. So I suppose that's more like the key drivers for the region's transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy.
I understand, however, that renewable energy technologies is quite pricier. Well, that's what we've been hearing, that it's more expensive, such as geothermal energy, solar energy. I mean, we've been hearing that it's more expensive. Is this true?
It's correct in the sense that the capital cost at the beginning it's much more compared to a diesel generator. But overall, throughout the lifetime of the technology, given that renewable energy is always free and it's available on a daily basis, and with little maintenance, the overall cost at the end, renewable energy would be more cost effective compared to fossil fuel. And of course, when you look at fossil fuel, you have to take into account the cost to the environment, and I suppose that's one of the negative aspects of relying so much on fossil fuel.
Just to inform you, our previous government, it has recently been changed, but our previous government were keen on developing or mining coal here in Papua New Guinea, one in the Gulf province and another a mine over in the Morobe province. What as a expert in this field, what are some of the advantages, disadvantages of mining coal in Papua New Guinea?
I think we are all aware that coal is one of the sources of energy which causes a lot of pollution. In fact, in the climate change negotiation, there has been moves led by certain quarters in the Pacific Islands to put a moratorium on the opening up of new coal mines in the world. But I think ultimately at the end it has to be a decision of the government weighing up the social and the environmental cost of the technologies and the sources of energy that is available to it. There are, of course, clean. Not all coal are regarded as dirty. There are coals with certain qualities, and if used more efficiently, then I suppose the adverse impact on the environment would not be that bad. But I think for Papua New Guinea, there are various sources of energy that are available to government. Hydro is one that I have witnessed myself. There is huge potential for hydropower in this country, and I'm sure government will decide on the best options for the country. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Pachuta.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to add, or is that?
I just want to add the fact that from where I'm working, the Pacific Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, our focus is to empower the private sector and the business community to invest more and drive the transition to cleaner and more reliable, affordable energy sources. And I think it's a challenge that is faced by almost all the countries in the Pacific, including Papua New Guinea too. And it's pleasing to see that the policies in the governments are changing. People are opening up the electricity market. We see independent power producers coming in. They can see money can be made. They are coming with their own capital and invest. And that would expand and increase the capacity of renewable energy in the region. Thank you.
Ms. Davis, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about Ag Unity.
So Ag Unity, we work with very low-income farmers in a number of developing countries. We've got projects running in Ethiopia and Indonesia. We essentially give them a mobile phone and we help connect up the village. And what mainly we do is improve trust and cooperation between groups so they can form into cooperatives. And as a result, because they're in a cooperative and because they're working with the power of numbers, they can earn more and do things more efficiently and productively.
Okay, so I understand you're here in Papua New Guinea, working here with the communities here?
Yes. Well, we were very lucky. So actually, Bougainville was the first place that we tried to start a project, and we've been working now for 3 years to find a good source of funding. And we were very fortunate just recently that the Dubai Expo Live event had a fund, and so they funded a trial project in Bougainville. And we also have a Japanese company that's hopefully going to start sponsoring a project in the highlands very soon with coffee.
Okay, so right now the company is currently in Bougainville and are planning to reach out to highlands.
To highlands, yeah. And we typically work in cocoa and coffee. Those are the two products that we find we get the best results with farmers. We're also looking at virgin coconut oil and some seafood products in other markets. So hopefully we'll be doing a lot of projects all over Papua New Guinea in the coming years.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Connectivity is something that is going to be discussed a lot during this forum, and it's something that's come up a lot as well because digital connectivity and that kind of thing. In Papua New Guinea, we kind of have a developing sort of infrastructure, a lot of infrastructure challenges. So how does your company, I guess, cope with that?
Well, that's a problem all over developing countries, and we see it a lot of times. So when we first created the Ag Unity solution, it's actually a suite of things. So we set up a tower in the village that's a bit of a Wi-Fi hub, and that connects to the cellular network or to satellite or via a newer technology called LoRa. And then we essentially rewrote the operating system for phones. So we replaced Android with our own operating system based on Android, and it's much simpler to use, but it also has a communication gateway. So it works when the phones are offline. So people can do a transaction. So if I'm a cocoa farmer, and I'm handing you my cocoa beans, we can record that transaction on our phones even if there's no signal. And then when we go near the village Wi-Fi, it'll pick up that signal and it'll transfer it back and record it. And the same thing works with mobile banking. So we've got a national bank in one of the islands that we're now building their mobile banking platform on our operating system because it's a much more efficient way of reaching those remote communities.
I'm Leanne Gerari in Brisbane, and you're watching Business PNG.
Thank you, Mr. Cook, for your time as always. I'm sure you're familiar with Papua New Guinea. We have a lot of, I'm not trying to be negative, but we have a lot of infrastructure issues when it comes to technology, when it comes to, So how can, speaking from here at a conference, how can our people in the villages, in the regions, in the rural areas, the farmers there, how can they basically benefit from what's been discussed here?
Yeah, and it's a very good question because often people talk about issues like using big data analytics for financial inclusion. It's not really an issue here. It's not really feasible because there's no data. People don't have that access at the moment to internet in rural areas, and it's very expensive if they would have the access. So what we really need to look at is, I think, we can look at best practices and examples from elsewhere, but we really need to think about PNG-centric solutions rather than copy and paste solutions from elsewhere. So I think one of the solutions is working with the big agribusiness firms in palm oil. Also we see partnerships with ExxonMobil, innovative agro industries, working with the coffee farmers, and they can also help expand financial inclusion, interest-free credit loans, this kind of thing. Other areas, we saw some interesting initiatives in the Highlands, working around the one-talk system. So perhaps with simple mobile phone devices, using even trusted community members to vouch for identification of people. So this kind of thing. Perhaps also what we see a lot in other regions is crowdfunding. So actually tapping into a larger pool of international impact investors that want to make a difference here. Maybe they wouldn't get the same returns as what they would get on the stock market, but actually a lot of them are more interested in having a long-term positive impact on society. And then we have seen interesting trials on blockchain technology here that were done by the central bank in partnership with the Australian government. I don't know what the latest is on this, but certainly some interesting innovations came out of it in terms of how to mitigate problems of lack of power and also lack of understanding on the benefits of a digital ID. So potentially going forward, blockchain could have a role to play as well.
Thank you so much for this. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think as I said, I think the most important thing for this week is that while we have people here from the Asia Pacific and sharing best practices and ideas, it's very important to take into account the specific circumstances that Papua New Guinea faces from its geography, from its cultural traditions, from the infrastructure deficit that it has, but also not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but working with the strengths of the country, the cultural strengths, the strong ties that communities have with one another, and building on that, using innovation to actually find new ways for financial inclusion and generating new sources of community wealth.
Right. While I have you here, I'd be remiss not to ask you, connectivity between Asia Pacific is something that's going to be discussed a lot today. I spoke to the Vice President for Huawei just a while ago, and what I want to ask you is, the whole geopolitics of it all between China and Papua New Guinea and the Pacific region, and sort of, I guess, pushing our traditional partners such as Australia and America, New Zealand, for them to, I guess, step up in the Pacific. How will all of this, in your opinion, how will all of this play out, I guess?
I think Papua New Guinea is in a very good position, actually, because Papua New Guinea has good relations on both sides. And we saw with APEC 2018 positive results. You saw the US, Australia, New Zealand and Japan come up with the idea of working with PNG on the electrification partnership. Now, we still don't know the full details of how they're going to navigate the logistical and financial challenges to achieve it. But if we can achieve that together with PNG, it's going to have a huge impact, because all the things we talk about, sustainable development, financial inclusion, none of it's possible without power. So if we can unlock we can give power to the regions, we can really unlock the potential of these regions in terms of entrepreneurialism, and this also creates new markets for goods and services. So this is really important, and that doesn't mean that Papua New Guinea cannot be close with China and have good, mutually beneficial relations with China. Papua New Guinea can do both, and I think Papua New Guinea is so important in the Pacific that if it's smart, it can leverage both countries, or both sides, do I say, against one another.
And this has been the final episode of Business PNG. We thank our valued viewers for always tuning in every Tuesday night, as well as for liking our pages on Facebook and on Twitter. For more information, or if you'd simply like to view all the previous episodes again, visit EMTV online at the URL at the bottom of your screen. Thank you once again, and from all of us here at the Business PNG team, good night.